So here's what Proverbs 22:6 is saying. If you're taking notes, I would write this down. Proverbs 22:6 is saying that if you ingrain within your children God's word, they won't depart from it when they hit adolescence. Yeah. It means something totally different than what you've been taught. You've been taught if you raise your children in church, they might depart from the church. They might depart from the Lord. They might go out and sow wild oats. But when they get old, they'll return to the Lord. That is not what Proverbs 22:6 is saying. What Proverbs 22:6 is saying is, if you will ingrain God's word within your children, if you will train them up in the way that they should go, when they hit adolescence, they won't depart. They will love the Lord. Yeah. So Proverbs chapter 22, verse number 6 has nothing to do with taking your kids to church and everything to do with parents personally discipling their children. And according to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse number 7, two of the best times to disciple your children is when you sit down at the dinner table and when you put them to bed at night. People, that's not something I came up with. That's Bible. That's Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7. Go ahead and look at verse number 7 again. Notice what it says. And thou shalt teach them. What is them referring to? God's word. In the previous verse it tells us God's word. So it says, thou shalt teach God's word diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house. Now, when did they sit down as a family back then? Proverbs 22:6 was written about 940 BC. Did they sit down as a family to watch TV 940 BC? No. Did they sit down to listen to the radio as a family in 940 BC? No. People, they worked when the sun came up to when the sun went down. The only time they sat down as a family was at the dinner table. When they came in, and because they were Jews, they were commanded by the law to do what all the pagans didn't do. God understood this concept of germs, so they were required to wash up. So they would wash their hands, they would sit down as a family, and the Bible specifically says, thou shalt talk of them, what? God's word, when thou sittest in thine house.